Machinery and Manufacturing webcast titled Automation in Plastics Manufacturing, What Works and What Doesn't. It is sponsored by Rapid Robotics. My name is Ron Shen, and I'm the editor of PMM. Before we begin, let me explain how you can participate in today's presentation. First, if at any time you're having audio difficulties or slides are not advancing, simply hit your F5 key to refresh your webcast console. If you're running pop-up blocking software, you will need to disable it to view the webinar. If you have any technical difficulties during today's session, please press the !help button in the upper right corner to receive assistance in solving common issues. This webinar technology allows you to resize the presentation by clicking the maximize icon in the upper right corner to enlarge the window. We welcome your questions during today's event. To submit your question, simply type it into the Ask a Question window on the left side of your screen and then hit the Submit button. We'll be answering as many questions as possible during the Q&A session that will follow the main presentation. But please feel free to send in your questions at any time and we'll add them to the queue. Please also be aware that today's session is being recorded and will be available on the PMM website within the next day for you to review. You'll be notified by email when the archive is available. When the webinar ends, please take a moment to complete the feedback form that will appear on your screen. Now I would like to introduce our speakers. Steve Barsanti is the Director of Customer Relations at Rapid Robotics. In his current role, Steve runs a deployment team, managing operations and customer relationships to ensure that automation is designed to meet the customer's expectations. Josh Laster is Vice President at G&S Business Communications. In his role as Vice President, Josh develops and manages integrated communication strategies for leading companies in the advanced manufacturing, energy, and sustainability markets, elevating brand visibility and generating business value through storytelling. John Cruden is Senior Director of Operations at Westfall Technic. As Senior Director of Operations, John oversees business excellence across all of Westfall's manufacturing plants, implementing training and a continuous improvement process to drive waste reduction and increase operational efficiencies. He has begun deploying automation systems across multiple plants to maximize asset utilization and address ongoing labor challenges. For more information about our speakers, check out the Speaker Details tab on your console. Welcome, gentlemen. The floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Ron, and hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Really appreciate you making time for today's session. As Ron said, my name is Josh Laster. I'm really excited to be moderating today's discussion, which is incredibly timely given everything that's happening in the industry today and the pace of change that you're all likely experiencing. So I'm thrilled to have two incredible guests with unique points of view on these challenges with respect to labor supply constraints and the trends in advancements in automation. So let's bring them in. Steve, John, thanks so much for joining.
Yeah, I'm excited to have this conversation, Josh.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with some of the issues facing plastics manufacturers today. I wanted to start with a little bit of data here from a recent survey of over 300 manufacturers. You see some of the challenges that are facing manufacturers across all spaces, but I think particularly relevant for plastics industry as well. Staffing machine operators, providing professional development opportunities, increasing organizational efficiency, cost savings, and trying to work in automation. Steve, I'll start with you. Does that sync up with your expectations, what you're seeing, and how does that kind of apply in the plastic space?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been on many factory floors, and pretty much every time I arrive to the facility, there's a now hiring sign up front. So this labor shortage is very obvious, and it's not just on the outside of the building. When you get on the floor, you see machines that are not being utilized that normally would be. You see people running around and doing multiple jobs where you would need multiple people normally. And so, yeah, this is a very obvious problem, and this data does not surprise me whatsoever.
John, does this jive with your experience as well?
Yeah, I spend time across multiple plants. I mean, we have factories across all of North America, and every plant that I'm at, working with the teams, has been it's been extremely lean. Getting workers, hired, retaining workers has been an extreme challenge. There's always cost pressures. The labor costs are increasing. Customers, are trying to maintain, their current pricing, and you're getting squeezed. So yes, these are definitely in line with what I'm seeing.
And automation seems a natural solution to these problems, right? But for facilities that haven't adopted much robotic automation, or who have never really tried it in any way, what do you think is the most important aspect of that, and why is it so important, in your point of view, to start right now?
I'll start by saying that this problem is only getting worse. I think there's a projected worker shortage by 2025 of 2.2 million operators, right? And so this problem is not going to go away. And the sooner you can get started with your automation journey, the better. And it's actually there's no better time to do so than now. There's many offerings, and technology is advancing such that it's a lot easier, more reliable, and more cost-effective to automate, various tasks on the floor.
John, what about from your point of view, for those that have been slower to adopt, what do you think is holding them back?
I think maybe the uncertainty of the amount of effort and the cost potentially. On top of that is, how are they going to support it from a technical standpoint? And I think I encourage people to look at the options like Rapid Robotics. We started a journey with them over 6-8 months ago, and it's really an eye opener to understand that there's partners out there that can really provide the support for small, medium, and large companies to be able to penetrate the automation inside their facilities without a significant burden or risk on an overhead perspective.
So you talked about some of the barriers in place. What was the genesis of your automation journey, and how did you kind of find a pathway through adopting some of that technology, overcoming those barriers? So everybody's trying to that want to try to get in automation. For us, it was getting approvals and justification to bring on the automation. I mean, there's one is having the understanding of what you're currently performing, and then what is the need and the problem you're trying to solve with that. And then being able to put together something that you can get approved. In the case of our journey within Westfall, when we started working with Rapid, it was actually the process was actually pretty smooth, and it was a good collaboration where we were able to get past some of the hurdles and understand what the path is going to be, the process is going to be, and being able to execute in an efficient manner. Because many larger people think of automation in the time it takes can be extensive, and I think many of the opportunities that people have and we have within our plants, there's some very basic ones where you can get some quick wins. So let's dive into how to kind of operationalize that. What should you look for? How do you prepare? Steve, you've talked about looking at the problem from the right perspective, right? And trying to really be intentional about how you automate before you automate, looking at what you're trying to solve for. Do you have an overall challenge or kind of point of view on that aspect?
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's two ways to look at your automation journey. You can try to solve a specific problem with a specific process on your floor, right? I have this process that I want to automate, and I need to automate it for these reasons. Maybe those are quality reasons, consistency, anything else that is specific to that task, right? And if that's a task you're trying to automate, sure, absolutely, we come in and we can take a look at it. Now, if you're trying to solve a labor problem, you should be looking at your automation journey a little bit differently. You should not have specific tasks in mind per se, right? You should just be looking at where will be the easiest place to remove labor. And put that labor on tasks that are challenging me on the floor, right? So I think it's really important to not just say, I want to automate and I want to automate this task, but to say, what are my goals here? Do I want to automate this specific task for this specific reason, or do I want to automate because I want to improve, our labor problem, or do I want to lower our average labor rate on the floor? And if that's the problem that you're trying to solve, then I think there's just a different way of looking at that. And so my suggestion would be, if that's the problem you're trying to solve, go into it with an open mind, right? There could be a task in the corner that you would never think to automate because, it just runs so smooth. And yet, yes, you have your one operator that sits there a day, but that could be the perfect place to start your automation journey. And if you're not thinking about those type of tasks with an open mind, you very easily could skip over the lowest hanging fruit on your floor.
And John, you've been through this process, right? In your experience kind of operating the automation program at Westfall, are there learnings? Are there things that as you've gone through some of these 5 stages that have really jumped out to you as a best practice that you think might be beneficial?
Yeah, I mean, for Westfall and what we've been doing, because we have multiple sites and we're not looking at just doing one system. We actually built a process around it, and in terms of keeping some consistency, structure, and making sure that we execute as flawlessly as possible. Our first system we worked with, Rapid Robotics, I think both sides had a lot of lessons learned from that, and we adjusted how we executed the following ones. But we have a very prescripted process that we've developed, and it's a collaborative with Rapid on each of the systems. And we've deployed 3 systems, and we're on the path to deploy. We're pushing to push up to 15 systems across multiple sites. So you got to be organized, but we got to be sure that we have a clear plan in place on how to deploy them, and that's what we've done, and we've learned a lot from our first system that we deployed.
And now that you've begun that automation journey, how are you looking at the next phases of these different elements? What does that scaled process look like for you?
I would say the how do I accelerate it is been the challenge. So you still need a certain level of resources. We talk about the labor challenges that we're having, just talking from a machine operator standpoint. I mean, but also in order to do these deployments, you do have to have some level of each of the sites working on it. Fortunately, I'm able to flex around and support all of the sites, but there's only so much bandwidth there. Having the right level of staffing that can help with understanding the applications, not necessarily being as super technical, but just being able to find like the low-hanging fruit, as Steve mentioned, and then working a consistent process, keep it simple, but making sure that we have everybody on page and on task so that we can deploy these in an efficient manner. So we've been adapting and expanding our capabilities across all of our sites to get some acceleration and growth in the automation side.
Steve, what about you? What do you look for? You've talked about some of that low-hanging fruit and identifying certain problems that you're trying to solve. What do you look for when you visit a customer site? What are the things that really jump out to you as potential success stories?
Yeah, so I mean, I have my normal checklist of things that I'm looking for on a specific task, right? Cycle time requirements, throughput requirements, or hourly, daily, monthly volumes, some of the specific requirements for that task, whether that's inspection or otherwise. But more generally speaking, what I'm looking for is a simple, repeatable process that has as much structure as possible. Right. So, speaking to what you typically see on a plastics plant, right, is parts are coming out of the mold structured and repeatable, right? However long you can maintain that structure is going to be best for automation, right? So that means if you have a Cartesian picking parts out of the mold and placing them into trays, great. Now the robot can pick directly out of those trays. If you have a Cartesian placing onto a conveyor belt, as long as it's fairly repeatable and not dropped from 2 feet above the belt, also something that's going to be right for automation. So oftentimes what I'm doing is I'm looking at the task that is right in front of me and saying, okay, well, where are the parts coming from on the floor? And is there a way to maintain that structure? Things that aren't great, parts just falling out of a mold into a big bin. If there's any way to keep them as structured as possible without just falling into a bin, that's going to be better. Now, there are technologies, and Rapid has the technology to be able to pick unstructured out of a bin. But at any time you can find a task that doesn't require that, it's always going to be a faster, easier deploy, and that's kind of what I look for.
For folks, listening to this that are just beginning their automation journey or have, looked into it in the past, what should they be thinking about in terms of improving their chances of a successful automation journey?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the most important things is be willing to be flexible, right? There's always going to be collaboration between the automation engineers and the process engineers, right? And so the process engineers will need to be able to look at their process and say, okay, well, I'm willing to give on this part of it, and I can change this, or we can have operators do this upstream that will facilitate automation downstream. But I think that's one of the most important things. Also, just having a really good understanding of your task, right? Knowing the requirements really well, knowing some of the tribal knowledge that is happening on the line that may not be documented is also really important. The amount of times that we go pretty far down the road and then find out later that there's a requirement we were not aware of because the operator just does this instinctively and it's not documented anywhere. But now that's something that the robot will need to do. Those are the things that you'll want to know up front because that will influence the design. That'll influence the speed at which we're able to get on the floor with a robot and have that task automated.
John, does that speak true to you? What was your preparation process like to get the site ready?
Well, the first one was a learning experience, but after that, I mean, essentially, it was making sure that everybody clearly understood, like the inputs, as Steve had mentioned earlier. We learned on a couple applications that if the numbers don't make sense, don't force it. That's a learning curve with getting the sites and the core team members that are focusing on those. We got to understand exactly what our current performance is at, and ensuring that we're attacking that in an efficient manner. And that was important for us to really start getting some traction. We brainstormed so many applications at multiple sites. We're looking at in every site looked a little bit different. We do plastics and molding, but there's a lot of different applications that made their easy wins and some that were a little more complex. We decided to really focus on those to gain traction, and then share with the other sites to say, look, these are the ones these are good applications that you can get some traction. And then you start getting some stability in terms of understanding where do we go to next with that.
Yeah, so let's dig into some of that lowest hanging fruit a little bit. You talked about many of the barriers to entry here, some of the ways that we can prepare. There are a number of operations that are commonly viewed as that lowest hanging fruit. Steve, can you talk a little bit about some of these areas and kind of what makes them ripe for automation?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, when I'm touring a plastics plant, one of the first things I look for is the secondary operations room. And that's always going to be a really great place to start because there's usually a lot of low hanging fruit there. Now, if parts are able to be structured, and most of the time, if it is happening in a room, parts are coming on a tray or in some kind of a cavity, and yeah, that is going to be extremely easy for a robot to now 10-day pad printer or a hot stamping machine or an ultrasonic welding machine. Now, there's other opportunities directly at the side of the press, which also add a lot of efficiencies to process, right? And we saw this exact scenario at Westfall Technic. There's parts coming out of a mold that need a gate clip, need a pad print, and then get inspected, right? And so we actually were able to move the pad printer directly to the press and automate the entire process in one step without having to now have parts go into WIP and get processed in a different room and all sorts of material handling that was just not as efficient as it currently is. So yeah, those are the type of things that I look for: gate clipping, hot stamping, heat staking, ultrasonic welding, pad printing. Really, the secondary operations are great.
But also streamlining the operations. As you said, there's a major efficiency component throughout the process there as well. So John, from your perspective, as you've been through several of these successful automations now at this point, can you tell us why you picked the operations that you did? Why did you kind of choose those initial components?
Well, a lot of what we've already said. Capacity has been a real challenge with the labor challenges we've been dealing with. So running 24/7, when you talk about secondary operations, specifically, a couple of them that Steve alluded to, we've deployed where we're doing either inspections, pad printing, ultrasonics. Those applications we need to be running around the clock. Well, they're very critical too in terms of not just making the part, but ensuring that it's got the highest quality. So, I mean, one of the key applications where we integrated it all, we had the process literally in another room. So we were building up a significant amount of WIP. Well, if we're having labor that's not there across the shifts, that continues to grow. And then you're dealing with consistency in terms of the quality of the parts that come out, whether it's inspecting it after pad print or whatnot. And in that case, we were able to actually put that all in one and take in this application. It was around 24 hours from beginning to end for a part to get completed. It went down to 35 seconds to get from molding through pad print, getting multiple hits on the pad print to visual inspection with vision and into a box. So it was a complete transformation. And key there is one of the key pieces was just being able to have the increased utilization, and it maximized our capacity, reduced our inventory. I mean, the benefits it multiplied in terms of what we truly saw at the end result out of that application.
You kind of perfectly teed up the next question, which is what has been the benefit to your business, taking a step back from the benefits within operations? How has this impacted Westfall, and kind of how are you seeing those initial automations paying dividends?
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. Reduction in inventory, increased utilization, reduced labor costs, on-time delivery, customer satisfaction. I mean, I can go on and on. I mean, I think the key there is that every application that you look at may not bear like what we're using as this example, but you're going to see, some level of benefit that you're going to go, wow, where else can I go after this? With the current market and what we're dealing with the labor, it's so important because every month something changes in terms of what the climate is, in terms of your capacity, whether that's, you need to increase your capacity on your machine, but you can't do it because you may have to you need additional labor to get that. And we continue to run into roadblocks. When you put in the automation, you have 24/7 coverage, and that's consistency.
When you were starting your search, were there particular things that you were looking for in an automation partner that really stood out? Obviously, I think there's a lot to be gained there, but there's a lot to think through as well. And so perhaps helping our audience think through how they find the right partner for them.
Yeah, one of the things that I was looking for was, I'll say speed, the time, from feasibility to full implementation. And certainly there's factors that play within that from both sides. Cost, I guess the service and maintenance of it. And I know Steve will probably elaborate on that. That is a key piece because we have a lot of sites that are very lean. We don't have the depth. And I mentioned that earlier, having the overhead to support automation systems can be a burden for small or medium-sized sites. And that was one of the key factors that we were looking at in terms of a partner. So we would have not just, we get the system, we launch it. Yeah, it's successful. We've been running great for 3-4 months. Well, how do you sustain it and maintain it? Whether you have, do you need the technical support to be able to support, repairing a robot, or if it stops in the middle of the night, what do? I don't have people on every shift. Those were the things that were part of our focus when we were looking for a partner.
And Steve, you've been through countless of these deployments. In your experience with Westfall and with others, are there particular elements of that partnership that you find are offering real value?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think that, there are countless companies out there that will design and install automation for you, right? In my opinion, what really sets Rapid apart is our commitment to ensuring that the customer has a successful automation experience, right? For Rapid, it's imperative that we do that because our business model incentivizes it, right? We want our customers to renew year after year. And in order to do that, we need to make sure that those systems are running, that the customer is happy with them, and that we're very quickly getting on any kind of problem that may arise, right? With any kind of automation, there's going to be service calls. And so for me, it's very, very important that when those do come up, we jump on it immediately, and sometimes we're even preempting service calls, and making sure that customer does not have to worry about this at all, right? We provide a lot more than just turnkey automation. It's augmented engineering. So John alluded to this, but when you're signing up with Rapid, you're not just getting a robot on your floor, you're getting an entire engineering team that's not just doing the design, but doing the maintenance and upkeep as well. So I really I pride myself on maintaining that really high level of customer service because I think that really does set Rapid apart.
We've talked a lot about the process, the planning that's required to make these deployments successful. There's obviously a lot of rigor behind that. Have either of you had any surprises in your automation journey? Maybe something that you didn't think or you thought could be automated but couldn't, or things that were too complicated that turned out to be achievable?
Yeah, I mean, I'm constantly surprised by some of the things that my team comes up with on the engineering side. There will be tasks that I'll take a look at and say, there's no way we can do this, or we're never going to be able to grasp that part. And next thing you know, there's a gripper downstairs that's picking that part up and proving to me that this is something we should go after, right? So, I think that I'm constantly being surprised. A lot of it is on the gripper technology. Rapid custom designs all of the grippers specific to each part, right? And so that gives us a leg up in being able to solve the impossible in some cases. I think that, in terms of turning a bad project into a good project, sometimes you have to just create the right characteristics, right? And you have to, change part of the process to make something that wouldn't normally be doable.
John, what's been surprising to you?
There hasn't been anything that's been like a shock. I've been doing automation for many, many years. There's times where, maybe you underestimate or maybe overlook little details that can come back to bite you. But I think in many instances, it's a never give up attitude. You gotta push through it. You gotta find alternate ways. As Steve mentioned, the technology and the capabilities, are there. You've got to just work together and come up with a revised solution. There's been many little challenges with some of the systems that we've deployed, but you know what? They were all fixable. So it's don't be scared coming into maybe starting your automation journey. You might run into some roadblocks. And I think that's kind of going back to this thing is to start with some easy stuff so you start gaining that confidence, because you will run into some challenges at times.
Yeah, so let's talk about some of those challenges. You've seen some missteps in automation as well, having been through this a time or two. What have you tried to automate that just didn't work, or what were the reasons for some of those initial missteps?
I think picking too complex of an operation, it will come back to, being a little overzealous. There's been times in my past where, we can automate this. Well, putting too many things together and trying to make automate that into a system, knowing if there's say multiple components or the complexity of the part that you're trying to either I'll say handle or manipulate into position and do an operation. The variation, if it's a multi-cavity tool, the variation from part to part can come back and be a real challenge. So I would say getting too complex of a process has been a challenge in the past.
Steve, where do you see deployments go wrong?
Yeah, I know I keep bringing it up, but structure is one of them, right? When there's not a lot of structure, repeatability, whether that's in part presentation, whether that's just in, we're trying to automate way too many SKUs with one end of arm tool or with one process, that's challenging. We struggle often with parts that are flexible or deformable or variable, right? If there's, the tolerances are not very tight on parts, that can be challenging. Highly dexterous tasks. So if it's hard for a human to do, it's likely going to be hard for a robot to do. Kind of a good rule of thumb is if you can automate, or if you can perform that task with one hand behind your back and blindfolded, then a robot can definitely do it, right? If you're really going to struggle with that, then a robot may struggle with that as well. Now, that being said, there's always surprising ways that you can accomplish things. And nowadays, our robots do have vision. But those are some of the pitfalls that you can often see when assessing a task.
On the flip side, are there also some tasks that should be perfect candidates for robots, have been perfect tasks for automation in the past, but for one reason or another, why would you decide not to automate something like that might be a really good candidate on paper?
Sometimes there's just not a lot of runtime on a part. If it only runs for 2 hours every week, it's tough to justify if that's the only opportunity. Now, Rapid Robotics has Smart Setup, which unlocks the opportunity for you to roll that robot between multiple processes on your floor. So sometimes even the 2-hour-a-week process will make sense. But it could be the perfect task for automation. If there's just not the volumes to support it, might not be the best start. There's other aspects, like if you have very large parts and they have very fast cycle times, you're going to accumulate a lot of parts in your work cell really quick. If you don't have an easy way of getting those parts out of your work cell, then you're going to need an operator to get them out of your work cell, right? And so those are some of the things that we look for when assessing automation is, how are parts coming in? How are parts going out? Is automation going to truly add value here? And Rapid is really good at being honest with our customer base and saying, hey, you know what? Either we don't think this should be automated, or hey, there's probably an easier way to automate this. You might not need a robot arm. Maybe you just need a little bit of some simple pneumatic cylinders or something along those lines to move parts. But there's often ways that things can be automated. Should they be automated is another question entirely.
Have either of you encountered anything that should have been an easy candidate for automation, but it just didn't work? And why might that have failed?
John, I'll let you start if you've seen any. If not.
It goes back to earlier when I commented, sometimes when you come and look at an application, and I've done this at one of our sites, here's a list of opportunities that are presented. And when you look at it, you've either one of two things, going back to the comments Steve just previously made. If the run hours aren't there, it doesn't make sense, right? If you're only going to run it for, 8 hours a day, and you don't know down the road 6 months if that demand's still going to be there, don't go after it. You got to know your numbers up front. Also, if you already have stuff, don't create extra automation. If there's tasks that you already are able to do with your Cartesian or everything else, be smart about it. Make sure you're evaluating the actual application, the process steps, and ensure, as mentioned earlier, that it is value add.
Anything to add to that, Steve?
Yeah, I just think that really understanding your task and what you're trying to achieve, that's the most important thing, is knowing what success looks like for this project. Again, I would say pretty much anything can be automated, but it comes back to that should, and whether or not it makes sense to automate it.
Excellent. Well, we talked a lot about some of these factors, the process, the deployments, the value proposition, even some of the challenges. Why is now so critical? Steve, I think you set some of this up in the introduction, but looking at the machine operator issues, the labor supply shortage, how are you thinking about this moment in time as an inflection point for manufacturers who are really being challenged on a lot of different fronts?
I think that the offering is here. I think there's been a lot of promise, for the last couple decades of automation, but now you're actually seeing some of that come to light, and actually, Rapid is proving it, right? We're not just another one of those robotics companies that is focused on solving highly technical problems and a gripper that can pick up anything you throw at it, whether it's a feather or a very complex piece of plastic. We are solving real life problems on the floor and doing it in a way that makes it much easier to embark on your automation journey. It's flexible automation. It's modular, and it's a good time to start. Right, this problem is only getting worse, and you don't want it to be too late before you start looking at automation for the first time on your floor.
John, what about you? You're well along your automation journey. As you think about some of our audience, or even your own goals, as you said, to accelerate that automation plan, what are you seeing as right now being a really urgent moment?
It goes back to the capacity constraints. I mean, we make products for healthcare, for packaging, for, industrial. Our customers are, everybody is wanting more product, and the constraints that we're seeing haven't changed. I mean, the past 2 years, I mean, I can rattle off a bunch of numbers in terms of our turnover, our lack of our gaps at every site. I mean, we're still seeing it. It's every month. I'm at one of our plants right now, and we're short operators here on especially off shifts and weekend shifts. It's extremely difficult to staff it accordingly. There's always, you can always talk about, it'd be nice to do it. You just got to you got to take that step and at least try a system, make it, as mentioned, make it simple, because this labor shortage and the challenges with the costs, it's not going away. It's the same it's been. If not, at times it's getting worse. So.
Yeah, that's for sure. And we talked some about the overall business benefit that you've seen at Westfall. What about from a competitiveness standpoint? Has it changed how you've been able to bid projects or deliver in a way that kind of sets you apart from competition as well?
Yeah, I'll say we are starting to, on new applications coming in, we are looking at some of these basic tasks, bringing them in on the front. So now that we've really established some base ground in our partnership here, I'm working with our quote teams and everything else as we look at new ones. And it could be basic tasks of just, handling a part into a box that you can't do with your typical methods, or you have to do an inspection, which requires an operator, which can be a challenge from a consistency and quality perspective. Those are things that we're now, using as a competitive edge, and also, not just from a capability standpoint, from also a cost standpoint, to maintain, competitiveness within the market.
Yeah, to echo that, I'm constantly getting calls from the sales team at many of our customer bases asking me about projects that they're trying to win and saying, hey, could this be automated? If so, what would what could we put as a labor rate, right? So, I'd say that looking at projects, right at the beginning is also a great idea, because it's a great opportunity to establish process that makes sense for automation right as you're designing it from the start.
Excellent. I know we want to leave plenty of time for Q&A. So some closing thoughts.
Yeah. So, I think we've talked about it quite a bit today, but, the labor shortage is not going away, and you're seeing increasing demand, and the supply chain is not helping anything here. But, what I can say from my experience is that as a plastic manufacturer, there's almost certainly something on your floor that can be automated today. And Rapid Robotics is here as a committed robotics automation partner, and we can help solve these problems. And we offer a solution that can start as little as $4 an hour. And what's great is that my team is working really fast. These are not projects that are going to take 9 or 10 months. We typically are deploying in 4 to 6 weeks. So if you'd like to learn more about robots as a service, get a free automation assessment, please visit rapidrobotics.com. John, anything you'd like to say on Westfall?
Yeah, I guess on Westfall's journey with the automation and what we've been able to achieve with it has really brought us into our next phase in terms of how do we grow in the plastics industry and remain competitive. And honestly, we're from Westfall, we provide a full end-to-end solution, and we're looking at applications throughout our process that how we can make them more efficient, more cost-effective, in automation, depending on certain inputs, cycle time, complexity. We're using this a more I'll call it a more basic automation solution as part of our strategy. So.
Excellent. Well, let's bring Ron back in to help us with the Q&A.
Okay, well, thank you, Josh and Steve and John. That was a very informative presentation. So a few people have already submitted questions, so we're going to jump right in. As a reminder, please take a moment to complete the feedback form that will appear on your screen at the end of the webinar. So the first question, gentleman says, sorry, I came in a little late. Have you discussed anything about blow molded parts? Have you implemented any automation with blow molded parts?
I love blow molded parts because they tend to be very light. And so, yes, we have worked with blow molded parts before. We've done, removal and boxing of blow molded parts. And again, yeah, I think it's definitely a great application for robots. And that's, for me, at least, specifically because they tend to be very light parts.
Great. So the next question, what about automating packaging?
So yeah, we are also doing some packaging, and there are various parts of the packaging process. Whether it's just loading a box, we get questions about building boxes all the time. I would say that's not something you want a robot doing, right? But when it comes to adding parts into a box, we do a box load and a scale to make sure that everything is in the box. We do pack outs. So yeah, we have definitely assessed and implemented projects for packaging.
Okay. Question is, my real concern is programming the robots. I just don't know how is the learning curve for in-house people to program and adjust the robots.
Yes. So it should not be a concern at all if working with Rapid Robotics, right? That is exactly why we have the service model that we have, is because we've learned very early that our customers don't want easy to program robots. They don't want to program the robots at all. So Rapid handles all of that. We come in, we find the automation projects. We then do in-house design testing. We get it working on your floor, and any kind of tweaks to the program, that's all handled by Rapid. And then that's no additional fee. It's all part of our normal subscription.
That's probably answers the person's question quite nicely. So what kind of robots do you generally use? Low precision URs or higher end?
So Rapid software is built to work on a variety of robots. We do have a collaborative robot offering, the low precision UR that is easy to work right alongside humans. We also have an industrial higher end robot that is faster and more precise when that's necessary. So we look at the automation project and we assign the best robot to the project based on the characteristics and requirements of that task.
Great. Thank you very much. That looks like all of the questions we have right now, so we're going to wrap up. It was an excellent presentation. I'd like to thank our speakers, Steve Barsanti, Josh Laster, and John Cruden, and our sponsor, Rapid Robotics. So on behalf of Plastics, Machinery, and Manufacturing, have a productive remainder of the day.